Welcome to another edition of Teach the Geek interviews. My name is Neil Thompson, founder of Teach the Geek. I work with technical professionals so they can present more effectively, especially in front of non-technical audiences. And you can learn more about that at teachthegeek.com. Again, that's teachthegeek.com. If you're watching this video on YouTube, please remember to like and subscribe. And if you're listening to the podcast, you can always rate and review. Every little bit helps. So today, my guest is Dr. Jacqueline El-Sayed. She's the CEO of the American Society for Engineering Education. I will say ASEE from now on because there's no way I'm going to say that whole thing the entire time. Every time I want to refer to it. Too many words. For years, but for years before that, she was a professor and an administrator. So I'm really keen to learn more about her interest in engineering, where they came from, her years in academia, and her plans for ASEE. So welcome to Teach the Geek interviews, Dr. El-Sayed.
Thank you much for having me.
So from the bit of research I did on you, I saw that you studied mechanical engineering. Where did the interest in mechanical engineering come from?
Well, I would say it's organic. I took a class, or I took a test when I was in high school, like many kids did, and it came out music because I'm a classical pianist, and applied technology. And I didn't really know what that was. So I did a report like they always have you do in high school. And I discovered engineering. You know, it was an unusual career choice for women at the time, of course. And so I started as I thought I wanted to be an industrial engineer first, but then I took the class Statics or Mechanics 1, and I just loved it. I thought like, wow, this is perfect with my brain. I understood it. So I became a mechanical engineer.
Okay. Well, you didn't stop there. You ended up getting graduate degrees too. So what made you decide to keep going?
Okay, well, that's kind of like all of us, right? I started actually as an engineer in the automotive industry as a truck engineer, commercial vehicle safety, or commercial vehicles, you know, big rigs, all different types of trucks in Detroit. And then I decided I really wanted to learn more, so I went back to get my master's. When I was there, I was put in front of a classroom for the first time, and I discovered like, wow, like angels were singing. This is like my calling in life, to be an educator. And then from that, I decided to get my PhD because that career track, I'm the first PhD in my family, but that career track requires that PhD. So, I mean, you have to really enjoy something to get 3 degrees in it, you know? Yeah, and so I do really love thinking about it. But also I love being an educator. So that was one of the reasons why I continued to get my PhD.
Okay, so you actually got your bachelor's and then you worked for a bit and then you went back to school, it sounds like.
Yep.
Oh man.
That's correct.
Oh, good. Oh, wow. You know, people like you, I commend people like you because it takes something to be able to go back to school after having worked for a while. I mean, did you actually have to leave working and then go back and do your graduate degrees full time?
Yeah, well, what happened was I first took a leave of absence from work to get my master's in mechanical engineering. But then when I discovered that my calling in education, right, then I did leave industry and my position there to go full time. I mean, I was always full time, but I left and I didn't go back after I'd taken that leave of absence.
Okay, so how long did it take you to get your PhD?
Quite a long time because I'm married and have 3 children. And so navigating all of those spaces, right, did take me quite a long time. I took about, at least 8 years to finish everything, but I was raising my kids and I'm almost married 40 years, so.
Oh yeah,
trying to combine all those things.
Yeah, you must have been dedicated. Wow, yeah, that's a long time to be in school.
I got 3 grandchildren now, so I'm really happy.
Nice. All right, you get your PhD, and then what'd you do after that?
Then I joined Kettering University. I'm the faculty of Kettering University. It used to be called General Motors Institute. It's actually my alma mater. That's why I was working in trucks and automotive industry. And so I, started teaching, loved the life of teaching, and eventually kind of came up to some leadership, right? Like this crux of wanting to, being loving teaching. The students loved the way we're talking about public speaking, the way I explain things and my storytelling and how I put things into context, right? But then there's always things you want to improve. And so that wanting to improve things led into leadership positions, first, like being elected the leader of the faculty senate, which is, faculty have shared governance, and then going into administration to becoming a director, then associate provost, and then a provost at another institution in Detroit. But the other thing is that I also started on a pro bono government track because of my work, because I was a professor in mechanical engineering, but also because I did have that experience in industry, and I actually held a CDL license, because a lot of us engineers, if we're going to design trucks, we want to be able to drive them. So I could drive big rigs. I was appointed by the governor, who's now Secretary of Energy, Jennifer Granholm, 4 times to the Michigan Truck Safety Commission, which is a state commission that oversees commercial vehicle safety, right? So that kind of led me into this other area of working with governor and also the Secretary of State on other types of like driver's ed and motorcycle ed, that kind of things. So I kind of had this parallel track between teaching and administration, but also work in appointed and elected positions in the government, state government in Michigan.
Wow. You have your CDL license? Do you still have it?
I don't have it now because I didn't keep it up, because it used to be by state and then it became nationwide. And at that time, there also was a certain number of miles you had to drive. And so at that time, when I was an administrator, I wasn't driving truck quite as much, right? So
wow.
So I let it go. I don't have it anymore.
Wow, that's so cool. So my barber, who I've been going to for years, he only cuts hair on the weekends, but during the week he drives trucks. So he has his CDL license. So just the some of the PhD.
Well, if you think about it, you have your own job, right? You can have your own. You can work for a trucking company, or you can have your own as a single carrier. You can have your own job. So it's independent. Sounds like he has 2 businesses if he has his own barbershop too. So
yeah, he's definitely he's doing his thing for sure. But yeah, PhD with a CDL license, driving big rigs.
Yeah, that was unique. Like, they called me up. This is what it is, Neil. I was actually like, here I am, a professor and a mom teaching, coming out of class. I answer the phone, and it's the governor's appointments office, and I'm going like, why are you calling me? And they said, well, we looked on your website and you have a background in trucking safety, in trucking associations, trucking companies, and as well as your CDL, and we want to appoint you. Can you apply by tomorrow? So I didn't really I was really confused. Like, you want to give me an appointment to talk to the governor? I didn't really understand. But anyway, I applied. Sure enough, I was appointed. Nice. So that's what happened. It was like 9 years of my life that I was working in commercial vehicle safety.
Okay, yeah, you've had a pretty interesting life up to this point, but now it's going to get even more interesting, because eventually you join up with ASEE. So I guess, well, at some point you decided to leave academia. What prompted you to do that?
Well, basically, I found that I was like, that was a recruitment kind of, right? The governor's appointment office called me. And also I was recruited into the other searches in academia, but I was also recruited into this search. I hadn't thought about joining ASEE, but they had a search. There's in employment, there's search firms. They called me and they said, with all the experience you've had, like, you're perfect for this role, because ASEE, spans academia. I was also 10 years on my local school board. So I also served in not only higher ed, but also K-12. So because I had spanned all different types of educators, K-12, higher ed, is also working in industry. Those are basically the vertical groups that are part of ASEE. We also expand horizontally across all disciplines. So not just mechanical engineers, like any type of engineering, because we are the subset that are the engineering educators. So anyone who's interested and focused on future engineers and engineering education, anyone who touches a future engineer, that's who are the membership of ASEE. And so I kind of span both the vertical and horizontal. So they asked me to apply. I went through interviews and got the job. And that was when I was chief academic officer. That was when, and then 3 years later, I've been promoted now to the chief executive officer of CEO.
You know, when it comes to engineering education, it just reminds me of when I went to engineering school, and just even thinking back on it now, you know, all these years later. You know, when you're in K through 12, the people that are teaching you, they went to teachers college. So they had to go through something to teach them how to be teachers, how to teach people. But it sounds like, well, not sounds like, I know for a fact that professors, they don't have to go through any sort of teaching credential to teach people, and it showed from the teachers I had, from the professors I had. You mentioned statics. Oh my God, I had to retake statics.
Oh, I love statics. Yeah, it was kind of like good puzzle solving, but you know.
Yeah, so I guess
I didn't love other classes like fluids, not my favorite.
Indeed. So then with ASEE, I guess or ASEE is the whole idea is to kind of get professors who, from what I understand, at least especially if you go to if you're a professor at a research institution, I'm not sure you're really judged based on your ability to teach people. It's more of I guess what you're able to research, how many papers you're able to publish, and people you're able to graduate.
Let me give you the overview of how faculty are evaluated actually in the different tracks. So first of all, yes, any kind of faculty, not just engineering faculty, are basically subject matter experts, right? So we have a PhD in our field and we're subject matter experts, and no one is taught to teach except for those that are subject matter experts in education, the education college. The faculty, though, are usually judged. There's a couple different kind of tracks of faculty. There's some that are only teaching, there are some that are only research, but the majority of faculty are tenure track, or what we call tenure and tenure track faculty, are judged on a tripartite mission of teaching, research, and service. And so it depends, the percentage of those might be a little different, depend upon the mission of your college or university. So a place that's R1, the percentage on research is going to be more than the percentage on teaching, right? In something that like my alma mater, Kettering, or Harvey Mudd College, or Rose-Hulman, or any of those that are primarily undergraduate focused, the percentage of teaching are higher than the percentage of research. But we do consider experiential learning and research as a type of teaching too. Like that working with students on projects, working with grad students on their research is also like we're guiding them, mentoring them to understand how to do that. We still consider that a type of education, right? The part that when we're working with students, grad students or undergrad students in that area would still be considered a type of education as opposed to classroom or online, right?
Okay.
Is that helpful?
Yeah, that certainly is helpful. So if you're a professor that is tenure track, it's a tenured professor, and teaching is something that you're being judged on, but it's not really something that the school, at least from what I understand, the school really help. I mean, does the school do anything to help you in becoming better at it? And if not, what can the professor do to get better at it?
Okay, well, one of the ways that we have is there's these things called Centers for Excellence in Teaching and Learning. And so, you know, yeah, professors usually think back what worked for them and they come up with their own philosophy of teaching. But then there are research-based practices. And my first administrative role was as the director of the Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning, which is basically professional development, providing resources for faculty to be able to use research-based teaching practices, learn from their peers in a community of practice, you know, understand how you design curricula. So that would be those centers are one very strong way that faculty get professional development to teach. There might be in some cases, I think, that some universities or some either when they're a PhD student or in their orientation provide faculty with some guidance and professional development on teaching.
All right. And then when it comes time for a professor who's up for tenure and they are being judged, at least in part, on their teaching, how are they judged? What kind of metrics are used to judge them to see whether they're even worth the tenure?
Well, there's often a portfolio of ways to judge. So, and faculty have kind of like two tracks. Get judged annually by their department chair or department head, but in the promotion and tenure track, that's a committee of their peers who are going to review their portfolio in all three of those different areas. So in the teaching area, of course, there's going to be a teaching philosophy. There'll be course materials development. There'll be examples of teaching. There's you have teaching reviews by students usually. You know, I had to be reviewed by every student in every class, right? And in my university, everybody wanted to see all of my evaluations for all of the years that I've been teaching. That isn't always the case, but sometimes they're summarized, you know. But depending upon those do come into play. There's sometimes peer evaluation where, like, as a director of Center for Excellent Teaching and Learning, I might go into someone's you know, they might invite me into their classroom to give feedback on their teaching, which they could then put into their portfolio. But also we write what's something called the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning. And so we actually write papers about teaching in our field, and there's journals just on that. In addition to, like, for me, I'm in manufacturing, right? Writing journal articles or papers and doing work in my disciplinary area of mechanical engineering.
Okay. All right. Well, one of the things you mentioned was student reviews of the professors, and I can. It's difficult for me to wrap my head of whether the professors I had were judged based on those student reviews, because some of them were just terrible.
It's true.
It's like there's no way.
Well, there's got to be a balance. You know, there's a balance, and there's different ways, but it usually informs the process in some way. But like I said, it depends on the mission of the organization, the institution, and the way that they set up their promotion and tenure criteria, how those are incorporated. I can only go by my own experience, but that's usually a part of the portfolio of teaching.
Got it. So now you mentioned that you're the CEO of ASEE. What are your short and long-term goals being the CEO?
Okay, well, I consider that ASEE is a thought leader. So we work on the national level on projecting into the future what are competencies, like with all the different technological changes, and it's only going to continue to accelerate. What are the type of competencies that future engineers will need to have? Because it's those competencies that then we have to start integrating into our curricula and our delivery styles as professors. So thought leadership, looking into the future, integrating, like advanced manufacturing is something right now, right? And it has always been, but you know, there's a lot of push in our national at the national level for integrating many different types of technology. Then in addition, we do provide community practice. So our professors, you know, and our educators talk to each other, and in industry too, right? We have convenings, we have conferences, we have meetings. We have different ways to provide community practice and interaction and networking between members. We also provide professional development, and that could be our members providing workshops. We in headquarters provide workshops. I also have a portfolio of externally funded grants that provide specific types of professional development to the engineering community at large at no cost, because they're funded externally. And then we also do publishing. We have journals, we have conferences, and those usually have conference papers. And then we have journals where people can submit into, but in our area is a scholarship of teaching and learning. So it would be on engineering education, would be the focus. Like our biggest journal is a Journal of Engineering Education, right? And so then our members or anyone can publish in those areas.
Right. You know, one of the things that you mentioned, Dr. Sayed, was graduating engineers that have the skills, the competencies that are needed for them to be, well, competent engineers. And I think one of those big skills is just being able to communicate with others, especially people from outside of your field of expertise. Because I worked in medical devices and I often worked in groups, and typically I was a subject matter expert in product development, but everybody else was not, obviously was not that subject matter expert. So just being able to communicate with those people, and not just that, not just them, but even the higher ups, the decision makers, is really interesting. It was really important to be able to communicate with them as well. And I wasn't very good at it at first, but I got a lot better at it. And really, that's where Teach the Geek, the whole idea came from my own struggles. But when it comes to you giving presentations, or you doing public speaking generally, is that something you were always good at? And if not, what did you do to get better at it?
I think that I know that, for example, in the SAT, I did better on the verbal section than I did in the math. So while I'm an engineer, I used to write the school paper, and I think I've always been comfortable speaking in general, right? But the important thing that you're talking about is be able to understand the context of the audience, and that's key. And it depends on oftentimes on our experience. How do we understand the viewpoint of our audience, whether that is, whether I'm talking to the trucking association, right? Whether I'm talking to legislators, whether I'm talking to my students, right? Whether I'm talking to professors, any of these contexts, those are different audiences. So it's important to be able to the second thing is that you have to be comfortable, I think, with your own style, right? Like I have a style that I tend to be a storyteller, and I like to, I like to do analogies and give examples, but I always try to get those examples to be in the context of whoever I'm talking to, right? So as you're asking me questions, I'm thinking about your background, you're sharing me, I'm listening, right? I'm hearing what you're saying, and then I'm trying to give you examples and explain it in your own context. And I think those are both very important things. If I'm talking to people on the line, well, that's where I started. When I started at GM, they first put me on their line, and then they made me a foreman, right? So I had that experience to understand their viewpoint, and now I'm a mature woman, and I've had this breadth of experiences, so I think I'm better at going back and forth between different contexts. But it's definitely something that needs to be developed, and you have to get outside of yourself and think how, in order to really truly communicate, you have to try to listen and understand the other person, and then try to fine-tune what you're saying to make a connection in their own lived experience.
Nice. When it comes to giving presentations, at least the ones that you have to do now, do you have a process for putting them together? And if so, what is it?
Well, I do have a process, and it depends on, it depends, right? How do I put it together? Because it depends on what I'm going to speak to. If I'm comfortable that like, for example, I'm very comfortable talking to my members or my board members, because we have a shared experience as faculty, as administrators, as engineers in the field. I can readily do that. If there's an area where I don't have as much experience, which can be like, for example, a specific part of the government, and I need to talk to them, well, then I ask people who had that experience to give me some pointers. And I'm thoughtful about it, because it's really important to me to be able to convey it so that people can understand it. That being said, I think that you have to be yourself, and I'm going to be sharing my own experiences, but in a way that the audience would be able to understand it. And so I still have certain things that I like to convey, or something that the points that I have, but it's best if you can intertwine it and interweave it with as you listen to people, that's going to be the best way. So I do tend to, like for today, I went through and I thought about, okay, what are some of the points that I want to make, right? And but I'm not just listening off those points. I'm listening to what you're asking me. I'm listening to the cues you're giving me, and then I'm thinking, what are those things that I would like to share with you in the context of our discussion. Does that make sense?
Oh, it fully makes sense. And even if it didn't, I wouldn't say no. That'd be kind of weird. It made absolutely no sense whatsoever, Dr. Sayed.
That's a good point.
Like, what do you want me to do now, buddy? I already spent 3 minutes.
I hope I'm making sense. I mean, you think that an engineer should be able to be logical, right? That'd be like the number one thing.
Absolutely. So for the people who are watching or listening to our conversation, Dr. Sayed, and they want to get better at giving presentations or public speaking in general, what would the number one tip be for you to offer them?
Well, I would say that practice, right? Make yourself your own curricula. You can do this. Like, to dip your toe in the water, first try speaking out loud by yourself, right? Then go to somebody you trust and practice with them, right? And ask them for feedback. Try, kind of ramp up how you're comfortable and in different contexts. Always, I think that one of the things that always has been important to me is to always be continuously improving. So sometimes things go better than others, right? Sometimes we got a rapport and everything's great. Sometimes I'm not getting any clues from whoever I'm talking to, like they have no facial expression, right? And you don't know if you're hitting your mark or not, right? In the communication. So then you kind of feel like you failed, but you don't know for sure. But the truth is, okay, sometimes you're going to fail. Like, how many times did Edison fail before, he got something right? It's about trying, getting up, learning, trying again, and continuously trying and expanding your comfort zones. But of course, everybody gets nervous, and everybody has the imposter syndrome. Even people that are bigwigs, right? They have imposter syndrome sometimes, but you get a little bit better at just mitigating it. But don't let that stop you from trying. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work, sometimes it works better than others. But it's important that we just keep going and keep trying.
Absolutely. That answer definitely made sense. Those previous ones, though, I don't know about them. This has been a wonderful conversation, Dr. Sayed. Thank you for being a guest. How can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, I'm at ASEE, and you can contact me at my email, which is my first initial last name, and which is j.elsayed@asee.org. And if you forget that, just go on our website, asee.org, and you can look up staff, and you can look up CEO, and you'll find me there.
Excellent. Well, everyone, that marks the end of another edition of Teach the Geek interviews. My name is Neil Thompson. I'm the founder of Teach the Geek, working with technical professionals so they present more effectively, especially in front of non-technical audiences. And you can learn more about that at teachthegeek.com. Again, that's teachthegeek.com. Until next time, take care and stay safe. Thank you, Dr. Sayed.
Thank you, Neil. Bye-bye.